Good morning and welcome to Whitney in the Wild. I'm your host, Whitney Mendoza, and this is an edition of the Jungle Podcast brought to you by Liger Partners. And this morning, I am joined by Terry McDougall, and she is an executive and career coach of Terry B. McDougall Coaching. Good morning, Terry.
Good morning, Whitney. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I am so excited you're here. I have to get you to show everyone your mug again.
Okay. Yeah.
We were talking about this. Look, she has a tiger mug in honor of the show. I'm so excited. So I want to get into the topic in just a bit, but first I want you to tell us a little bit about you and why you started your coaching business.
Yeah. Well, I spent 30 years doing marketing. The bulk of that, I worked for two large national banks in marketing. And the last 12 years, I headed marketing for several businesses at my last employer. And I guess I just got to a point where I think some of the things that I thought I was going to get out of my marketing career, I started realizing I wasn't going to get that out of it. Like I really wanted to be a chief marketing officer. And the closer I got to that role, the more I realized that wasn't going to really fulfill me. And I started thinking about, well, what is it that I like to do and what am I good at? And I always very much enjoyed doing the coaching and mentoring that I did as a manager and as a leader. And at the same time, I had hired coaches a couple times at sort of critical junctures in my own career. And so I understood what they did and I understood how incredibly valuable they could be in helping people to overcome obstacles. And so it ended up that there were some restructurings at my company, and I was able to leave and have some time to think about what was next. Mm-hmm. And I decided to get a certification in coaching. And honestly, at first, I thought that I would just kind of have that skill in my back pocket for when I got closer to retirement. That would be sort of my off ramp, and I would use it in my new job and maybe have a couple of private clients on the side. But as I was surrounded by these other entrepreneurial minded people, I thought, what the heck, what better time than now to give it a shot? And that was 4 years ago. So I absolutely love what I do. It has a lot of meaning for me. It's extremely fulfilling.
Yeah. Awesome. It's, sometimes it's those things that we don't expect that force us to go out and do the thing we were really meant to do.
Yeah. I was always an entrepreneur at heart. I always thought of I describe myself as entrepreneurial. I was often doing, new and uncharted things during my career. And quite honestly, I don't think I would be very happy in a job where it was just like, okay, here's what you do every day. Just do it again. Right. I always had to be doing different new things.
Love it.
I get that opportunity every day now.
Yeah. Well, so that's a perfect segue. I was telling Terry just before we started the show that I've titled this Not a Pipe Dream, How to Be a Happy Overachiever.
Yeah.
And we were discussing that I would consider myself an overachiever. You would consider yourself an overachiever. Yep. Not that that is a negative badge to wear by any means, but we can take it too far.
Yeah, for sure.
So
go
ahead. No, let's dive into that. I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about this because it's me.
Well, yeah, it's me too. I mean, it's funny when I start coaching people, sometimes they're like, how did you know? And I'm like, because that was me. Yeah. I describe the people that I work with as high achieving professionals who are successful but not satisfied. And what I mean by that is that if you looked at them on paper, you'd be like, wow, what a career. Look at that title. Look at that company. Look at all the perks and the money that come along with what they're doing. But underneath of it all, they're paying a high price for that success. So they're not necessarily in the flow. They're literally grinding it out. And that can leave people feeling depleted and burnt out. Sometimes the stress can bleed over into their relationships. It can deplete their health. And so I think a lot of times people realize, like, I don't think I can keep this up. But yet it's so ingrained in them that a lot of times it's hard to stop.
Yeah.
And what I have discovered, actually, when I was writing my book, I knew this kind of intuitively and instinctively because I had experienced it, but I came across a study by this guy named Tom DeLonge, who is a professor at Harvard Business School, and he talked about high achievers being addicted to external validation. And I was like, you know, a light bulb went off. And I was like, yeah, of course, you know, because the reason why we get successful is because we were rewarded for doing the right thing all along, right? Like, what does the teacher want? Oh, we got an A. Well, let's keep doing that. And we would get to a point where I'll speak for myself, but I see it as a pattern and others as well, that we start to delay gratification, that we actually lose connection with those things that we innately like to do. And if you think about, you know, when you're a little kid, when you're like in first or second grade and your mom's like, come in and do your homework, or, you know, come in for dinner. And we're like, no, I want to play, right? We're connected with the things that we love and that we want to do. And we resist that discipline. Yeah. But after a while, when we're rewarded for that discipline, and then we often kind of lose connection with those things that make us happy, or maybe even those things that make us innately who we are. And I think that the key to being a happy overachiever is getting back in touch with what we think, you know, defining what success looks like for us, feeling comfortable putting boundaries in place, and recognizing that, you know, it's funny because sometimes I'm working with people and they'll be like, you know, like they have anxiety over something at work. And I say, well, what's the worst thing that could happen? Yeah. I might get fired. And I have to stop and to say, well, what did you tell me that you just got on your recent performance review? Oh, you got 5 stars out of that? Yeah. What do you think the likelihood is that you're going to get fired? Right. Or you're the top performing salesperson. You know, what do you think if you gave 95% instead of 110%? What's the likelihood that they're, you know, going to kick you to the curb? And they'll laugh and say, oh, you know, I guess that's true. It's not going to happen. So it's really a matter of like starting to realize that there's a lot of gray area, and maybe we need to allow ourselves to go into that and get comfortable there and realize, yes, there is room for who we want to be personally and how we show up at work. We don't have to just define ourselves by somebody else's expectations.
Yeah, that is amazing. Excuse me, that you say that, because I was literally thinking before the show, because I knew I wanted to take it from the corporate realm, but also moving from corporate to running your own business. And I was thinking about the differences. And typically in the corporate realm, you are reporting to someone, which is that someone who gives you the promotion, gives you the affirmations, doing a great job, moving you up. Yeah. And when you come out of that, that person is you. And so you can be lost because all of a sudden you're the one who has to give you your, you know, your own praises, your own guidance. And, like, I mean, thinking, you know, wow, because and this is the bad part, I think, of being an overachiever. I will often put something that I want to do or I want to achieve last, right? Like it moves to the back burner because there are all these other things I need to do because all these other people are depending on me to do them, right? Like it's, I don't have any kids right now, unless you count my 2 puppies, but I feel like the business is, you know, really.
Yeah, that's your baby. Yeah, that's your baby.
And people within their, you know, within the business on the team, they do depend on me. And so as business owners, that's where, you know, we shift from having a boss to you being your own boss, but then you have more responsibility underneath.
Yeah. Sometimes I have observed that the worst boss that people ever have is themselves. You know, that they're actually harder on themselves than you know, a boss might be. And I do think that it's important to be able to step back and be somewhat objective about how we look at ourselves. It's difficult to do, but, you know, maybe having some, you know, guidelines or standards or something to say, like, kind of like what I was just saying, that we can have these feelings like, oh, I'm failing. But then like maybe look at how much revenue did you bring in last month? Is that really failing? Maybe you wanted to, make a certain amount and you only got, 95% of your goal. Is that really failing?
Mhm.
The other thing that I would say about that, it's very common. I mean, there's a reason why people are successful, right? Because they don't stop. They're driven. But you've got to make sure, like when we talk about driven, well, let's like use a car as an analogy. Like if you never take your car in for maintenance and you don't fill it up with gas and you don't get the oil changed and you don't change the tires, like you don't ever give it a rest, it
Yeah.
is not going to keep going, right? You can't just go running on empty. You've got to sometimes, put the car in park and relax, take a nap.
Right.
Go out and do something that you love to do. And what you'll find is that when you come back, you're probably going to be more efficient.
Mhm.
Maybe you're going to come back with a great idea for your next promotion or for your next product or something like that. And that doesn't happen when we're running on empty.
Right. Yeah. I love that. You've got to give your mind room to roam.
Yeah.
I wanted to take it to Facebook really quick and give Vanessa a shout out. She said, great discussion this morning. And then we have a question from Jackie. She asks, do you think women fall into living up to others' expectations easier?
Totally. I think that women, I mean, this is a generalization because I often get questions about, gender differences, and for every generalization, there's also somebody that is the exception. But women tend to care more about what other people think. We tend to be a lot more relational than men are. Men, it's okay to compete. It's okay to be the rugged individualist as a man. With women, it's like we usually have relationships and we're caring for people. And so sometimes it can be hard to, kind of put a stake in the ground or put a boundary in place. Because and a lot of times it's because maybe over time we've showed up in a certain way and it's it's hard to show up differently.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
So with that, I wanted to take it to a little bit of I keep trying to come up with a different word for pandemic, Terry. I have to come up with another word for this. Pivot we've overused. I don't like these words. But I recently saw this article that, pandemic burnout is on the rise.
Yeah.
So we have this added feature. We were talking just before the show, like if you were having to quarantine inside, most of us were, at least for some, period of months, even if we're back out now. That blurred the boundaries even more, right? Like you didn't know what 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. was. And by the way, you didn't have to drive anywhere or sit in any traffic. And there really wasn't much to do. So we just all kept working.
Yeah.
So walk us through that. And, maybe it's, let's go wherever you feel led to take this, but maybe it's how do we transition back? What are some things we need to, to put in place to ensure never get there again? What have you been seeing as we've been opening back up a little bit and people are either shifting and they're moving back to the office, or some of us, are still in quarantine and we've just learned ways to adapt around it?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I did a marketing career satisfaction survey in December and January, and I asked, has the coronavirus had an impact on your career satisfaction? Is it like, has it stayed the same? Is it negative or is it positive? And about 44% of the people said that it hasn't had any impact on their career satisfaction. And surprisingly, 27.9% said that it has negatively impacted it, and 27.5% said it has positively impacted it. And as you can imagine, for those who said it was positively impacted, it was because they have more time, or they have more flexibility. They can, I think somebody said something like, I can walk my dog in the middle of the day, right? Like they just like that flexibility. For the people that were negatively impacted, for the most part, it was two things. One, their industry had been very negatively impacted. And so there was a lot more pressure on them. But probably the bigger issue was lack of boundaries between work and home, and feeling like people at work expected them to answer emails at, all times of day and night, et cetera. And, I think that all of this, whether it's now or whether when we go back and we can go into the office, it's all about boundaries. It is about deciding for ourselves, how much do I want to invest in this? And I'm not saying that there's not going to be consequences if you say, I'm working 9 to 5 and that's it, right? That maybe you're not going to get picked for the next promotion. But I'll tell you that whenever I was in the corporate world, I did not work 60-hour weeks, and a lot of people did. And it did not have an impact on my advancement. And it's, I'm married and I have 3 kids. And I was actually, I think that it's because I had enough energy when I came into work to do a good job. I wasn't feeling burnout and super, resentful or whatever of how much I felt like I had to invest. But I don't want to make it all about me, but it's really about boundaries. And what I always say is, like, the first no is the hardest. Like, once you kind of put a boundary in place, and then a lot of times people won't come and ask you after that. And I'll, in my book, I think I have a section that's like, 10 ways to say no. And it doesn't have to be like, hell no, get away. It could be, I have work to do. I have some of my own work to do right now. If you come back at the end of the day, if I have some time, I'll help you out. Or, or you teach somebody, you say, you know what, you can Google that. Right.
Yes.
And if you give people just a small little pushback, a lot of times they'll figure it out for themselves and they won't come to you anymore. And I'd love to give an example of somebody that I worked with who got promoted she ran a team of 8, and she was sort of like a player coach, and she got promoted to be the head of department. It was 50 people. And she was trying to run the department of 50 the same way that she ran her team of 8. And when we started working together, she said to me, I think I'm going to ask my boss to demote me back to my old job. And I'm like, why would you do that? Like, you learn a few skills and you're going to be very happy. And there's no reason for you not to get paid and have that. One of the first things that we did, she was complaining, I'm working like 70 hours a week. I can't even get my work done at work because, people are coming in my office all day long. I have to take it home and do it. And so the first thing that we did was I said, I want you to close your door 2 hours a day. And she was really resistant to it because she felt like, what are people going to think? Like, I want to be a boss who has an open door policy. And I said, let's just see what happens. I said, I think people are going to figure out how to get this stuff done on their own. And you can let them know, I need to get my work done too. So I'm going to close my door 2 hours a day. And, you can come to me before or after. But I mean, it did make a big difference for her. And she also did find that people were figuring out how to do things without coming to her directly. And I also think that it's really important to think about doing your highest value work. And in her case, being the department head of 50, her highest value work wasn't, showing somebody how to find something on the system or, helping them figure out a formula on the spreadsheet, right? Like, yeah, she can do that, but that's not her highest value work. She's like really overpaid if that's what she's doing.
Yeah. That's so interesting. So, okay, I have a question to that. Because the open workspaces have been growing in popularity. So what do you say to those? Like, if you don't have an office?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people do things like, have little signs or, I know a lot of people work with headphones in. If you have the opportunity to, I know in the last place I worked, we had, phone booths and stuff like that. And I know that my last employer, part of the reason why they went to the open workspace is that they were hoping to give people more flexibility to work from anywhere. And so, maybe you decide that on the days that you've got to really do focused work that you're working from home. But I think that you can decide what the rules are for you. And you can say to people, I'd appreciate it if I've got my little sign up that says silence, please, or whatever, that you don't come and ask me questions. during that time, because that might mean I'm on a conference call or that I'm really engaged in, some deep focus work.
Yeah. No, I was laughing because we've got these cool booths in our office space. And I was like, great, I'm going to make a sign that says the door is closed.
Yeah, exactly. You can do that. And I think that a lot of times we don't do these things because we're afraid of what people are going to think, and
100%.
Like I said, the first no is the hardest, and when people are like, oh, wow, she's drawing a boundary. But then they're like, okay,
right. Yes. Oh, I love that. Okay, great. So I wanted to give you a couple of minutes at the very end because, of course, Liger Partners, we're a marketing firm. And so I wanted to bring it back to marketing just a little bit. And I got super excited because when we were talking about this just before the show, you have a podcast.
Yeah.
On Marketing Mambo, which I think is this amazing name. Tell us about it.
Well, it started because I worked in marketing for so long, and I have a lot of clients that work in marketing and advertising. And I was talking with one of my clients who's a marketing consultant back in December, and we got off on this tangent about the intersection of marketing and technology. And she said, this would make a great podcast. And I thought, you're right, it would. And so as I told you earlier, on Marketing Mambo, we chat with marketing movers and shakers from around the world. So it's really about, I love marketers, and there's so many different roles and different perspectives in marketing, and I love learning. So I'm just talking to people. I'm literally have talked to people from around the world and in many different areas of marketing as well. So it's interesting marketing conversations. It's definitely not like a how to, build your sales funnel or, how to do Facebook ads or anything like that. It's really more like a couple people that I've had on the show recently, or actually their upcoming episodes. They haven't, the one that launched on Monday was a guy who was a filmmaker in Hollywood, and then he decided to start his own media company. But in between, he went in the Army, he worked for the government, and he's written a book, and, just like really interesting perspectives on storytelling within marketing. I recently talked to somebody who's a marketing professor at University of Chicago, and he is a consultant to medical tourism or doctors and clinics and hospitals that attract people from a medical tourism standpoint. So, I learned a lot actually, just about why Brazil's such a, big destination for body plastic surgery, and Korea is a big destination for facial plastic surgery, and some of the reasons behind that. But he works with them to help them build their brand around that. So I'm like, wow, I didn't even know that existed. But it's cool. It's really fun. A lot of fun.
Wow. Well, Terry, thank you so much for joining me on Whitney in the Wild.
It was great to be here.
As we close, because you mentioned your book, I'd love for you to throw the title out there and let our listeners know how they can get in contact with you and find out more.
Yeah, here's my book. It's called Winning the Game of Work, Career Happiness and Success on Your Own Terms. So a lot of it like what we talked about today. It's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And if people are interested in talking to me, they can get in touch with me on my website at terrybmcdougall.com, or you can get linked in with me and we can correspond that way. My handle there is Terry B. McDougall. And if you're interested in listening to Marketing Mambo, it's got its own website, which is marketingmambo.net.
Perfect. Well, on your site, when I was prepping for the show, you have on there, success doesn't have to be hard. And I think we've given some great tips. You've given great tips. I've taken notes on how to go implement these, but I think these are really great actionable tips to create that pathway for success and for us to still be overachiever and use our time and our talents in those best places to also get things done and not go crazy while doing it.
Yeah, I think we all deserve to be happy.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for tuning in. Catch a new episode of the Jungle Podcast tomorrow morning. We'll see you then.